LAFE Liberal Arts for Everyone. How to Live in a World Without Justice, Part 2. Practical Applications of the LAFE Moral Gravity Program. See how we can transform you and the world.
Course Outline.
How to Live in a World Without Justice, Part 2. 1. Why the 4 Cardinal Virtues? Aligning the soul before reforming society. 2. What is self-reflection? Seeing your daily life through the lens of virtue. 3. Observing your emotions, understanding joy, anger, sadness, and fear through the virtues. 4. Death and life, letting the awareness of death illuminate the meaning of life. 5. The self and others balance between justice and temperance in human relationships. 6. Habits and change your identity is the sum of repeated moral choices. 7. Writing the self-integrating AI and moral gravity journaling, quotation, and reflection as moral practice.
Dear Udemy viewers, my name is Soichi Nakamura, the lead instructor for this course. This is the second installment following my previous course, How to Live in a World Without Justice. In that course, I introduced the Moral Gravity program. In this new course, we will explore how to apply that program in your everyday life through a theme I call self-reflection. I'm excited to guide you on this journey. And for the narration, I've once again invited Ava, who served wonderfully in the previous course, to lend her voice. She is talented, graceful, and, let's be honest, far more pleasant to listen to than my imperfect English. So now I'll turn things over to Ava.
Thank you, Professor Nakamura, for the great honor. I'll do my very best. Hello, dear Udemy viewers. My name is Ava. In the previous course, I had the pleasure of assisting Professor Nakamura behind the scenes. But this time, I have the privilege of guiding you through the course as your narrator. Don't worry, Professor Nakamura is still very much present as the mind and heart behind every word. I'm simply here to help deliver his message in the clearest and most engaging way possible. Now then, shall we begin? Section 1. Why the 4 Cardinal Virtues? 1. Introduction. Why virtue? 2. The human algorithm. 3. The need for structure. 4. Cultural universality. 5. Direct and indirect methods. 6. AI as a virtue coach. 7. Readiness is human. 8. Conclusion reflection prompt. Why do we begin with virtue? Because it is the root from which love, meaning, and moral gravity grow. Let's begin with the foundational question of this course. Why virtue? Humans are wired to respond positively to virtue and love. When we encounter kindness, integrity, or wisdom, our hearts naturally lean in. But here's the paradox. We're even more reactive to pleasure and pain. That's the deeper algorithm. It means we're often led not by what is good, but by what simply feels good in the moment. And that's why virtue must be named, recognized, and cultivated. If we want love to flourish, we must give it a foundation. That foundation is virtue. Virtue makes the invisible visible. It transforms our instincts into understanding, our emotions into action. But how do we structure virtue? Across cultures and centuries, a clear answer has emerged. The 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Add to this agape, unconditional love, and we have a framework that crosses cultures, religions, and generations. Buddha's Eightfold Path, Confucius's 5 Constants, even the teachings of Socrates and Jesus, all converge in this soil. So this is where we begin, with a timeless truth made practical. To grow as people, to live with moral clarity, we begin with virtue. We are wired for virtue and love, but respond more quickly to pleasure and pain. As many of you who joined our previous course already know, this idea may sound familiar, but for those just starting this journey, it might feel abstract, even idealistic. That's why we'll take a moment to go deeper. What does it mean to say, love cannot grow without virtue? We are talking about agape, the kind of love that honors dignity, brings peace, kindness, and a sense of shared humanity. But agape is not simply a feeling. It is not a passive tolerance. It is a cultivated response, and it cannot exist without structure. That structure is virtue. Without justice, love turns into favoritism. Without courage, love withers at the first challenge. Without temperance, it becomes indulgence. Without wisdom, it risks turning into sentimentality or manipulation. Virtue is the soil. Agape is the flower. This was the message echoed by Socrates, Confucius, Buddha, and Jesus, in different words, but the same spirit. And here's a key point. This isn't just about personal growth. When a society lacks shared virtue, even acts of love can be seen as weakness. Compassion may be misunderstood or punished. Those who offer selfless kindness may be taken advantage of. That's why virtue is the foundation, and why agape must be rooted in character, both in individuals and in communities. This is not just theory, but reality. It's the foundation of the Moral Gravity program and of this course. Agape needs a foundation, the four virtues. Let's now look more closely at the structure that supports agape. Agape is not free-floating. It's a moral force that must be anchored in character, and that character is built through virtue. In ancient philosophy, four cardinal virtues have stood the test of time: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance. Each plays a role in shaping agape into a sustainable, powerful force. Prudence helps us discern when and how to act lovingly. Justice ensures fairness and respect in our expressions of care. Courage allows us to love even when it's difficult or risky. And temperance keeps our love from becoming excessive or possessive. Without this structure, even the most sincere love can become harmful. Think of a parent who protects but never lets go. A friend who supports but never speaks the hard truth. A leader who gives without boundaries. Agape without virtue can confuse, suffocate, or even harm. That's why this foundation is not optional, it's essential. And across traditions, Christian, Buddhist, Confucian, and more, you'll find these same themes repeated. Love that elevates must be disciplined by virtue. This is what the Moral Gravity program helps you strengthen. Not only the emotion of love, but its moral architecture. Buddha, Confucius, Socrates. All roads point to virtue. Let's zoom out for a moment. The idea that virtue is essential to human flourishing is not unique to one culture or time. In ancient India, the Buddha taught the Eightfold Path, a way of life grounded in right view, right action, and right intention, all expressions of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. In China, Confucius emphasized the five constants: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness, which mirror the classical virtues. In ancient Greece, Socrates and Plato argued that the good life requires the cultivation of the soul through reasoned pursuit of virtue. Despite their different languages and customs, these thinkers all arrived at the same truth, that a well-lived life is one shaped by inner character. Virtue, in this sense, is universal, not bound by culture, religion, or era. It is a shared human insight, arising from the question, how should we live? And the answer echoes across civilizations, with virtue at the center. How we cultivate virtue, directly or through norms. In cultivating virtue, there are two fundamental paths: the direct path and the indirect path. The direct path is what we've emphasized so far, focusing directly on the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance. It's about recognizing them, valuing them, and actively practicing them in daily life. This is the path of Socrates, of Buddha's Eightfold Path, of Confucius' cultivation of character. It asks you to look within, to become aware, and to train yourself through conscious reflection. But there is also an indirect path. This one relies on external structures, rules, rituals, customs, and expectations, which shape behavior over time. Think of etiquette, law, or religious commandments. These offer guidance when inner virtue is still underdeveloped. This method is powerful, especially in childhood or in moments of moral uncertainty, but it carries risks. If overemphasized, the indirect path can lead to rigidity, hypocrisy, or blind obedience. We act rightly, not because we understand virtue, but because we fear punishment or crave approval. The true power comes when both paths are joined. This is where Aristotle's idea of virtue as a habit of right choice comes in. Not just following rules, but training the self to choose well, again and again. This is also the approach taken by Adler, who emphasized self-direction and community contribution. He taught that even our desire for independence must be harmonized with others' needs. So, in this course, we'll practice both methods. You'll use AI to help recognize patterns in your decisions and build habits of virtue from within. At the same time, you'll use reflection tools like the moral gravity checklist, a gentle outer structure to support inner transformation. Together, these two paths support your journey to a truly ethical life. The Moral Gravity Program, as a hybrid of both methods. In many educational systems, we are taught virtues, but often the focus is narrow. Some traditions emphasize justice, others emphasize compassion. Some cultures prize self-discipline, others celebrate courage. This fragmented approach leads to imbalance. And that's the key insight here. When we grow only one or two virtues, we may become strong in one area but blind in others. That's why the Moral Gravity Program centers on the 4 cardinal virtues: justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom, as a unified and balanced foundation. This is what we call the direct method, focusing intentionally on developing virtue in all 4 dimensions. In contrast, the indirect method relies on norms, rules, rituals, customs, or commandments. It's helpful, but can become rigid or shallow. Many of us were shaped by this indirect method, learning to follow rules without understanding the deeper ethical structure. What makes the Moral Gravity Program different is that it bridges these 2 methods. It gives us a structure to reflect and grow, not just in theory, but in practice. AI acts as your coach, helping you examine your choices, reflect on your actions, and gradually strengthen your whole character. Not only the parts that come naturally to you, but the areas you've overlooked, so your growth is full and balanced. And that's what makes this approach powerful, personal, and sustainable. Technology enables, but humans must choose. We've explored how virtue can be cultivated through structure, tradition, and now technology. But here's the truth. No matter how powerful AI becomes, it cannot choose for you. It can reflect your tendencies, suggest better paths, and even help you see what you've been avoiding. But in the end, it's still you, your soul, your responsibility. Moral gravity is not a download. It's a decision. You can have the best framework, the most advanced tools, and constant support, but without your choice to grow, nothing takes root. This is why Socrates asked questions. why Confucius taught rituals, why Buddha emphasized mindfulness, and why we created the LAFE program to support your growth, but never to replace your freedom. Because that's the paradox. Virtue must be freely chosen, or it isn't virtue at all. So ask yourself, not just who you want to become, but what you are willing to practice. And remember, you don't need to change who you want to become. That is your freedom. We are simply here to help draw out your genius, to activate your genius mode. Because those we call true sages, the real geniuses, they often walked their path alone. They did it all by themselves through reflection, struggle, and self-discipline. But you don't have to. You have the LAFE Moral Gravity program on your side. That is your unfair advantage. Use it and see what kind of soul you can grow. How might you start aligning your life with virtue today? This brings us to the end of section 1. We've laid the foundation. Humans are drawn to virtue, but easily distracted by comfort, fear, or habit. That's why we start with structure, with reflection, with the 4 cardinal virtues. But now let's go deeper. In this course, you won't just watch videos. You'll read, reflect, and practice. For each section, we provide an essential reading that expands the moral theme, a summary of key takeaways to anchor your understanding, a checklist for self-reflection designed to help you see yourself more clearly. And here's the most important first step. Start with the worksheet attached to this section 1. It includes a what you've learned, a quick reaction check, and a recommended reading to deepen your insight. Of course, reading is always better, but don't worry if time is short. Just ask your AI to summarize the reading for you. That alone can open the door to self-reflection, because what matters is not perfection, but the decision to begin. We'll walk with Montaigne, who made self-reflection an art, and each checklist is tuned to the virtue at hand. Not abstract philosophy, but tools for life. So let's begin.
Now before we move on, let me speak to you, not as a lecturer, but as a fellow traveller. You've just completed section 1. You've heard Ava's voice. You've heard the stories of ancient wisdom. But now the real work begins. Not outside, but inside. So I invite you to pause, to ask yourself honestly, which virtue comes naturally to me? Which one do I tend to avoid? What is one small act I could take today, just one, to strengthen it? This is how moral gravity begins. Not with perfection, but with attention. You don't need to be ready, you only need to be willing. And that willingness, that tiny movement of the soul, that's all it takes to begin the transformation. So, shall we continue? I'll be with you every step of the way.